Hello and welcome everybody, I am Brandon, and we got a bunch of video game sales news to talk about today. That's right, the NPD for April 2022 finally dropped and we got all this new video game statistics and analytics information. So we got everything from LEGO Star Wars, the Skywalker Saga, slashing through the competition, to Nintendo absolutely crushing it in the hardware market and even breaking some records. We got all that and more on another episode of Game Corner. Thanks for watching, everybody. If you like what I do, please like the video, subscribe to the channel if you'd like to see more, and I'll stop wasting your time. So like I said, we got the NPD for April 2022. For the uninitiated, the NPD group actually breaks down sales numbers for lots of different industries, but on this show, we particularly look at video games. If you guys missed last month, so make sure you check out March's NPD before you check out this one. So as you can see, once again, total sales numbers are down as a whole. Obviously, this has probably contributed to the hardware shortage we are continuing to see throughout the year. That all being said, it is less down this month than it was down last month. We were losing about negative 15% last month, and we're at about negative 8% this month. Still a pretty big loss on hardware overall, which in turn is going to affect accessories and game sales, as you can see here. Like I said, we can kind of see this overall decline in gaming sales being made throughout the year of 2022, and this is most likely attributed to people obviously going back to work, people not getting those stimulus checks coming in anymore, and most importantly, this hardware shortage we continue to keep seeing throughout the year. This is actually the 6th month in a row now that we've been seeing declining sales over the video game industry as a whole. And once again, while this could be attributed to more people returning to work and kind of just having less extra money to be spending on video games, this is almost certainly because of this chip shortage and the lack of hardware we're seeing on the market right now. We've actually been talking about this pretty much all year. That's actually why I mentioned that you should watch March's NPD video before you watch this one, because we kind of cover a lot of this stuff in the previous video and kind of roll over into the next one. And unfortunately, we're probably going to end up seeing this chip shortage go until 2023 or even further. Even the CEO of Intel, Pat Gelsinger, said this over in an interview at CNBC. That's part of the reason that we believe the overall semiconductor shortage will now drift into 2024. From our earliest estimates in 2023, just because the shortages have now hit equipment and some of those factory ramps will now be more challenged. That's part of the reason that we believe the overall semiconductor shortage will now drift into 2024, just because the shortages have now hit equipment and some of those factory ramps will be more challenged. So basically what Gelsinger is saying here is that they've been trying to ramp up chip manufacturing by creating these new high-tech manufacturing facilities to create new microchips, obviously in an attempt to alleviate this huge semiconductor issue that we're having throughout the world. Problem being that a lot of their equipment that they need for these high-end facilities are things like robots and computers, which, you know, we're having a shortage on right now. This in turn is sort of creating a bottleneck where we obviously have far more demand than we are able to produce.
And overall, as we've seen in the COVID world, the PC is the essential device for work, learn, and play, and there's nothing changing that characteristic.
Like Gelsinger said, pretty much since the COVID-19 pandemic, everybody has needed a computer or some form of communication so they can keep in contact with loved ones or even just do their schoolwork or their normal work, making this whole situation kind of a big game of tag that we just can't seem to catch up on. Moving on, unfortunately the Xbox has been overtaken once again by the Switch this month. It did have a little bit of a meteoric rise to fame last month when they were able to put more units on the shelves and actually took the #1 spot in hardware for 1 month there. And as unfortunate as that is for Xbox, the Nintendo Switch is absolutely crushing it right now. It's once again been overtaken by the Switch in units sold for April and year to date, actually. I genuinely feel bad for the Xbox. I feel like they just really can't catch a break. All of their first party games get pushed back. They just can't seem to break through the hardware market here. Anyway, another huge win for Switch over here. It's actually become the 4th most sold console in US history and the 6th most sold console in the world. Alright, let's play a little game here. I'm gonna guess what the top 6 most sold consoles in the world are right now. So, in no specific order. We got PlayStation 2. We got Nintendo DS. We got Game Boy. We got PS4. And then Switch. There might be an Xbox 360 in there somewhere. Thankfully, the PS5 wasn't totally left out in the cold here, as it actually also led the overall hardware sales for April 2022. I do want to make it very clear that the Switch sold the most units The PS5 made the most sales. Okay, cool. So even though things are sort of overall down since the boom of the COVID-19 pandemic, we can say for certain that the video game industry is even more popular than ever and is continuing to become more and more popular as time goes on. Next up, we got the top games of April 2022. And first things first, we got Lego Star Wars The Skywalker Saga force choking its way into first place there. And even going on to become the 6th most sold Lego video game of all time in a matter of a few weeks here. I truly did not see that one coming. We gotta give a serious round of applause to Lego Star Wars The Skywalker Saga here. Very impressive stuff. Especially with Elden Ring sales being so high as of recently, I'm pretty baffled that they were able to beat that spot, at least for the April most sold games. I personally really like me some Lego Star Wars too. I've been playing through Lego Star Wars, and it is really a turning point in that series. I think that they added a lot to the series with the voice acting and kind of making it more this open world, open area sort of situation. It truly sort of has a No Man's Sky feel to it, where you kind of hop planet to planet and you can even, you know, ride your spaceship in between those areas. It's pretty neat, I gotta say. I just say ride your spaceship? Ride your spaceship? Anyway, if you haven't given Lego Star Wars a shot yet, I actually would recommend it. I've been having some fun with it. You might want to wait for it to maybe go on a sale or something if you're not really into that whole collectathon situation, because that's pretty much all it is. But if you like some Lego humor, and if you're kind of just looking for something chill to play while you're putting off your backlog, I'd definitely recommend it. Of course, we do have Elden Ring still in our second slot. It has not gone too far, ladies and gentlemen. And then MLB The Show surprisingly squeaks up into third place as well. Did not see that one coming either. There are apparently a lot more baseball fans out there than I had thought there were. And then Kirby only barely being squeezed out by baseball there. God damn it. And then right after Kirby, of course, we have the Nintendo Switch Sports that just released at the end of last month. It is truly proving to be an absolutely massive time for Nintendo right now. They have been releasing game after game this year and just charting throughout 2022 so far. Not to mention the Switch is still selling like it had just come out and is pretty much charting just like their games are every single month, and really doesn't look to be stopping anytime soon. And this kind of got my brain going about this article that I read recently over on mynintendonews.com, sort of about this transitionary period that Nintendo is going to be coming into after the Switch. In the article, Nintendo President Shuntaro Furukawa was asked, "The upcoming software titles for the current fiscal year have already been announced to some extent, and I think one of the major differences from past platforms is that a rich lineup of new software is still being added to your library, even in the 6th year of Nintendo Switch. Can you explain the reasons for such a difference? Also, I think that a next generation system will be launched at some point in the future. Historically, newly launched platforms did not always have a smooth transition from prior generations. Please tell us your thoughts on how you plan to maneuver to the next generation of hardware." Furukawa responded by saying, "We have already announced some software titles that will be released through next spring. Unlike in the past, even though Nintendo Switch has gone through 5 years since its launch, there is still a rich lineup of new titles to be released. The biggest reason for this is that thanks to the smooth launch of Nintendo Switch itself, we have been able to concentrate our development resources on one platform. On the other hand, looking back on past experiences of generational change, such as the change from the Wii and Nintendo DS eras, we recognize that one of our tasks is ensuring that the transition to future generations of hardware is as smooth as possible. To that end, we are focusing on building long-term relationships with our consumers, while continuing to release new Nintendo Switch software for consumers to enjoy. We aim to maintain relationships across hardware generations through services that utilize Nintendo accounts and by providing opportunities for them to experience our IP through other non-gaming channels." Okay, anyway, that is some pretty fluffy stuff, I have to admit, but let's kind of get into the middle of that. In my opinion, this sort of boils down to Nintendo saying that they want to keep the Nintendo Switch line going as long as physically possible to kind of push off that next generational transition into a new console, generation. And they're kind of trying to set up this way to transition their audience and player base over to this new system when that time comes. Which in turn sort of says to me that we're not far off from getting some other iteration of a Switch down the line here soon. And even then, maybe in the far future, we're not looking at a device that's super far flung from what we have with the Switch now. And I also think he's kind of saying that they're looking for other ways to reach their audience other than video games, also like making movies or making theme parks, which they're currently doing now and seem to be very invested in doing more with. Alright, last but not least, we got the year-to-date most sold games of 2022. Obviously, this list is updated every single month when we get a new NPD list, so it's kind of cool to see where games are charting over the whole year, and this kind of plays into the bigger Game of the Year conversation. Obviously, Elden Ring is still king here. It is just sitting pretty at that #1 spot, and especially with big games like Starfield now having been pushed back to next year, this is going to end up being the most sold game of the year in my opinion. Unless we get some big blowout thing like God of War selling insane amounts of copies, and obviously with the hardware shortage and everything else going on, I doubt it. But as always, we take everything with a grain of salt on this show, so we'll have to wait and see. And then once again, Lego Star Wars absolutely coming out of nowhere into the second spot there. We do need to remember that this game pretty much launched on just about every single console that's out there right now. And obviously, the only thing bigger than Pokemon and Horizon is Lego and Star Wars, so I'm not insanely surprised that this has just been breaking barriers as far as sales go. And then of course right behind Lego Star Wars we got our Pokemon and Horizon, just barely getting knocked down a peg by Lego Star Wars there. Kind of a bummer, but Lego Star Wars is a perfectly great game to say the least. And then Pokemon and Horizon are still holding out there strong too, just barely getting knocked down a peg by Lego Star Wars. Once again, I love to see so many of these fantasy-based games up in the top sort of sections here. It's really cool to just see that people are not buying Call of Duty and Madden every year, and they're finally reaching out and doing something different there with their money here. Anyway, we do have MLB The Show sort of sliding into home plate there, right into 5th place, and kind of knocking Gran Turismo down to 6th place. I did expect Gran Turismo 7 to hold out a little bit longer, I have to admit, but I think just with MLB The Show being on a lot more consoles, it just had a lot easier time selling copies, I think. And we have to remember that all of these games are above the Mario Kart 8 line, and in Jeff Grubb's words, that means you're successful. Anyway, big round of applause to every game that made the NPD list this month. That's about all the game sales news I got to talk with you guys about today. We were talking about how Lego Star Wars absolutely sliced its way through the competition. Nintendo hardware sales are bonkers as usual. And the top 10's game list is actually starting to look like games that I want to play. Anyway, I'm Brandon. This was Game Corner. Thanks for watching, and have a kick-ass week.